Aloha, ladies and gentlemen. I am Sunday, and I'm going to be doing the video today. I'm Sprinklebeard, guys. Welcome to the video. Today, we're going to be doing Evaluate the Epic on Aeon, Mistress of Oblivion. So, Aeon, Mistress of Oblivion, is a support champion in this game. I want to put it out there right away. We're not going to be focusing on her damage stats or like even her survivability stats. We primarily want to focus on her ability to do her job and how effective is she. For players that are not familiar with her, the easiest comparison I can give you is we're going to be comparing her very heavily to Marri in this video. The reason that we're going to be comparing her to Marri is that these two champions kind of fill similar roles, but they do it in a different way. The gigantic advantage that Aeon has over Marri specifically is that she is a lord of the cultists. So increases faction allies' basic attributes by 10%. Increases faction allies' damage dealt to enemies inflicted with stun, freeze, immobilize, or any other crowd control effects by 20%. So not only is she giving a 10% boost to the basic attributes, and again, I can't stress how meaningful increasing the base stats of a champion are, because that means all the gear and stuff that they have on is then made even better. But on top of that, this 20% damage boost to anything that is slowed or anything that is, frozen, whatever have you, works. What does not work, just for clarity, is that if you have a defender out, that defender is blocking a unit. That defender is not controlling the unit. However, if the defender does have something in their kit, like a stun, so new players will have Rex. Rex has a stun in his ultimate. Yes, that stun does count, but understand being blocked does not count as being crowd controlled. It is any of those debuffs that you can clearly see on an enemy. Those will count. All right, so for Aeon versus Marri. Marri, when we reviewed her in our earlier video, so we're going to just do a quick touch on her. And I do mean an extremely quick touch on her. Marri's main gimmick is that she's an ice witch. So as she attacks, she throws out an icicle that slows a unit. And when the unit is slowed, they then are given both vulnerabilities in the game, both physical and magical vulnerabilities. Marri specifically is great about controlling one target because the slow that she inflicts is up to 75%. And then her ultimate is an AoE stun. When we switch over to Aeon and we talk about her stats specifically, she actually has, I think, identical stats to Marri. I guess I should have just looked at that real quick. We're not going to. But all the stats are very, very similar. There's not a clear one of these champions has a massive advantage over the other. Both of them have around 1750 attack. So in this case, it's actually 1786. They both only have about 450 defense, 484. Some of the best things about them, they both have a 2.0 attack speed, so they do attack very quickly. Their rage regen is 14. That is some of the highest I've seen in the game. I haven't seen a champion have over 14 rage regen. We will see in the future. Both of them even have the same grid pattern for what they can attack or what they can affect with their kits. So Aeon, her talent is basic attack target count +2. So instead of her just attacking one target, she actually attacks up to 3 targets. So basic attack just deals magic damage to one enemy. So right now we already have kind of a knock against her. Marri at least had a slow on her A1. However, this isn't a huge deal, and more specifically, she has a lot of rage regen baked in here. Marri does have that same rage regen, but still a very good thing. Next, basic attacks and Death Vortex, so that's her ultimate, inflict the vulnerabilities on the target. So we have a physical vulnerability for 12% and a magic vulnerability for 12%. Now, these vulnerabilities without skill dust in them are more effective than Marri's by 2%. Then, after we skill up Aeon and after we skill up Marri, they both cap out at 20%. So both supports are going to do a very similar role here. Death Vortex. Casts a gravitating force dealing 70% AoE damage per second to the afflicted enemies for 4 seconds. The force also pulls up to 8 surrounding enemies towards its center with a one-time strength, inflicting a slow. To summarize this very quickly, when she ultimates, it's going to deal damage to the targets, and up to 8 enemies are going to be pulled towards Aeon, or towards the center of her ultimate. Depending on where you place Aeon is going to really affect how this ultimate pulls them. With one-time strength means that they will move down 1 block, or move 1 block towards Aeon. This does not affect elite enemies or like bosses for obvious reasons. So you cannot pull Dragon closer to the side with an ultimate like this. Some of the big tentacle head monsters, and for people who play this game, you know exactly who I'm talking about. You cannot pull them. As we give her skill dust, the effects that increase, we can increase the effect duration up by 2 seconds. So instead of just dealing damage for 4 seconds, it will deal damage up to 6 seconds. The damage can scale up from 70% up to 80, 90, 100, and 110% damage. However, I want to stress that Aeon's damage is quite low. So even though this does deal more damage and that's useful, it's not what we're going to be depending on. The skill cost of her ultimate is a base of 800. It gets reduced by 40, 40, 40, so that's 120. And then an extra 80 down here, so that's 200 in total. So her ultimate will scale down from 800 cost down to 600. Then she also gets initial rage increases of 40, 40, 40. So again, 120 plus 80, total of 200. So her ultimate will scale up to, starting off with her her rage when summoned will be 400 instead of the base 200. So 400 needing up to 600 to cast her first ultimate. That makes her very, very quick to get to her first ultimate. That will feel very good. To compare this again to more side by side with Marri, Marri's ultimate is at this 1200, and it scales down to 1100. So admittedly, this is another advantage that Aeon has besides just being a lord, is that her ultimate will literally be up twice as frequently as Marri's. However, Marri's is a hard stun. It does freeze enemies, and the duration of the ultimate can last longer. So if you're doing something like the AoE arena, being able to have this blizzard constantly falling down and enemies get frozen the moment that they touch it, you can bottleneck certain enemies, or you can, ult very early, and as the wave comes running in, all of them will get frozen as they run into your ultimate. This is very similar. The duration effect of her ultimate and being that black hole will pull enemies in that same manner. I don't know if enemies can run out of it, because admittedly, I have not tested out Aeon in things like the AoE arena, which would be one of the best places for me to see, can enemies just run through the black hole, or do they keep getting sucked in for the full 4 seconds, but it's those same 8 enemies that just keep getting pulled in. I'm not 100% sure, to be honest. Let's move on to Aeon's Awakenings. Increases Death Vortex, so that's the ultimate, pulling force by 2 strength, and it extends its duration by 1 second. So this 2 strength is if the unit was 2 squares away, or like at the very edge, as far away from Aeon as possible, you could pull that champion or the enemies way back. Again, this only works on your smaller enemies. So the big heavily armored guys, or the guys with tentacle heads, they can be slowed, they can be frozen. However, they will typically not get pulled back or get pushed around the map. They're kind of too heavy for that, or their elite status makes them immune to it. Extra HP, always good for survival. Basic attacks and skills increase the duration of damage taken debuff, on the target by 1 second. So both champions, both Marri and Aeon, do have, I think it's a 4 second. Marri might actually have a 5 second on her debuffs. We're not going to keep flipping back and forth anymore. But increasing that from 4 seconds to 5 seconds is very valuable. This also lets you put Aeon in positions very far up the battlefield, because all she has to do is peg the target, and then as the target runs into the rest of your team, they will still have the debuff on. Your team should be able to clean them up at that point. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with having Aeon close to your other champions, like your defenders or your fighters, so that she's guaranteed to constantly be putting on that debuff. I'm just saying that in terms of positioning, don't feel afraid to put her out further ahead, because she'll mark the target for 5 seconds. 5 seconds is a very, very long time for something to exist. It's kind of only on your slow-moving champions that strategy might not work out. Rage regen, so auto, so this increases it from 14 to 15, always useful, and for her ult being at 600, going from 14 to 15 is a significant change. I do like that a lot. And then Awakening 5 deals 100% extra damage to controlled targets. This does help her ultimate do a little bit more damage and feel a bit better. For the fact that Aeon here is... Whoops, that's Iona. The fact that Aeon here is more of a hitting multiple targets, I do think that if you're looking for a support that could put out some extra damage, Aeon, because she's a lord and because she increases the damage of those targets, that means she benefits from her own passive as well. I do think that the damage value, like the damage point, if you will go to Aeon over Marri. However, Marri having that 75% slow, Aeon slow, I didn't touch on it, is another 75% slow, but Marri has it on every basic attack, whereas Aeon has to use her ultimate to slow targets. Does give you different roles for these champions, although it is very similar. I will say I love Aeon's aesthetic. Everything about this looks sexy but elegant in a way. I absolutely love the design of the champion. I think this is gorgeous. And the fact that her basic attack can hit up to 3 targets reliably is slightly better than Marri. Marri has I think it's a 35% chance to throw out extra icicles. And then as you awaken her, hers gets a little bit better. One of the biggest advantages for Marri is that you are guaranteed to get Marri on day 3. Aeon, you will have to either pull her, or there was a shard event for her recently where you could earn her. And right now, myself and some of the other community members believe there's probably going to be this rotation where every month or couple months, a lord is going to be offered as a shard event. So there is going to be potentially, I should say, very potentially, there is a chance that Aeon will be available again in the future as a shard event. Next, let's talk about where Aeon is going to be best at in the game. So, anywhere where you need to increase the damage of your main damage dealers, I feel like Aeon's going to be amazing here. Very similar to Marri. So, unfortunately, this video is going to mirror the Marri video very, very much, because these two champions fill a very similar role. And unfortunately, both these champions kind of do the exact same thing for the same amount of damage. I will say, I do think Aeon will provide more damage, but ultimately they're both doing the exact same role. In the campaign, she's going to be a great debuffer, so if you need to do more damage to a boss or to some big heavily armored targets, yes, bringing Aeon will help out a lot. Just be aware though that pull that she uses with her ultimate is not going to affect your big heavily armored units because they are elites. However, Marri's freeze does tend to work on them, so it's a point in Marri's favor. In things like the arena, again, anytime that you need to debuff something to do more damage to it or to pull enemies over or maybe away from your nexus, you could definitely use Aeon in these regards. What's nice is that the way that the arena is designed, it has that top hook facing down. Putting her there, she can hit the entire alleyway on the far left, the small alleyway as they come towards your nexus, and hit the main bowl area where most players set up a giant trap net to kill whatever's walking down the path. Obviously, you could put her anywhere. It is up to you and what champions you have to make her the most effective version of her. In the Void Rift, a lot of the Void Rift has a lot of big, high stat enemies where they're not necessarily super powerful, but they have large HP pools. So debuffing them is going to help you significantly. I admittedly do not tend to use Marri or Aeon here. However, I would be curious as I get to the next Void Rift. So right now I'm hitting Elite Void Rifts. As I get to, I think it's Hard is the next Void Rift I get into. I potentially will be using Marri or Aeon more frequently, and I do plan to test out Aeon a little bit more. I am favoring Marri a whole lot, though, for that hard stun in her kit. Seems extremely valuable. So in our raids, I'm going to try to go through these quickly. Again, this depends on what you need and what you need her for. A lot of the promotion raids specifically, I do feel like you can out-bully them. What I mean by this is, for your marksmen, if you have 6-star marksmen, usually that is enough that you don't even need a debuffer for any of these. But if you were struggling with any of this content, a debuffer causing both physical and magical could help you, or could be the difference maker. Or if you really need it, you could have Marri on one side of the map and Aeon covering the other side, and this would give you a 100% coverage for the enemies would have to fly through one of these debuffs. For mages, I do think this is one of the better places for her, and this would allow one mage to potentially kill things quickly where you might not need 2 or 3 damage dealers. You could probably have one mage and Aeon to do enough, and not need to have 2 or 3 damage dealing mages. In Endurance, a lot of the things don't actually have a large HP pool, so I don't think this is a great place for her. However, she does have coverage, or some of the faster moving critters. You could argue her ability to pull them back or stop them from moving forward would give you the advantage that you need to kill them off. In melee attack, we have limited platforms. I don't think having a debuffer is going to be nearly as valuable as having a healer on one of those platforms. So use your best judgment. If you feel like you're doing enough damage, or you're nearly one-shotting the enemy and just not one-shotting, you could put her there. I would argue, though, any other damage dealer would make sense at that point, or any other AoE mage would make more sense. Guild Boss and Artifact Material Raid, I'm starting to lump together because you're fighting a boss with a large HP pool. So on both of these, as long as you can keep the debuff up reliably, so Aeon and Marri, we tend to build them like full attack speed. We want them attacking more than once a second. That way the debuffs stay on the target that we're hitting. For that reason, I would argue that she's perfectly fine in both of these. It's just up to you if you want to play with Marri or if you want to play with Aeon. Again, Aeon seems like she has a little bit more damage in her kit, and slow doesn't affect the guild boss. So, like, it does work in terms of he is slowed, so it would activate Aeon's passive. However, you would still need to have Aeon or another lord out to have that passive be available. So I don't think that you'd play with Marri and Aeon in Clan Boss. But providing both debuffs of the physical vulnerability and magic vulnerability would be great on both of these. Just make sure that she's not taking up a very valuable platform that you might need. The Artifact Material Raid also reduces the platforms, so make sure that she can reach, and if she can't reach, I would argue she's probably not worth it, or you might need the damage from that platform or a healer on that platform rather than the debuff specifically. Tide is actually an amazing place for her. I could potentially see having Marri on one side and Aeon on the other, again for that 100% coverage and the 100% guarantee that whatever's walking through, I can't say 100%, but most likely would be debuffed as they try to walk through because of the way that their two kits work. So there is a potential that using Marri and Aeon in Tide, and I would potentially either have them in that first, the most far right spot. Hey Paragon, how you doing, brother? As close to the wave, so as the waves try to walk through your debuffers, they are debuffed before they get to all your damage dealers, or it would be one space from the right. So one space in, so that they can reach everything, so that as they're running into your fighters and defenders, they are heavily debuffed. Resource Raid. This is one of those places where I typically would argue, no, you don't need a debuffer at all. This is one of those levels that you can typically just outmuscle the content rather than needing a debuffer. However, when you get to the higher levels, earlier today we were goofing around and we were intentionally trying to do the final EXP raid, and the enemies were just too bulky for me, so I just couldn't kill anything. This would be a reason where having a debuffer could be very advantageous, is that we are greatly increasing the damage that we're doing to these targets. Here it looks like I have Comet's gear off. I don't remember where I put it, but we currently have it off. But as we can see, with high attack speed, she's having no problem hitting everything. And then there's that one-time strength. We're just pulling everything back in. And as we can see, it multiple vortexes. So some of these mid-sized creatures were getting pulled in and pulled in multiple times. So it would just let you or your damage dealers have your way with them. This could be extremely valuable in things like the AoE arena, because as we can see, I'm nearly already back up. So if you built her with attack speed and rage regen, especially just for arena, you could potentially just pull a lot of the small critters far away from your nexus reliably and prevent yourself a whole lot of damage during that whole time. This would also let champions like your Comet, like Osiren, really your... Hold on. Did not want that to end. Things like your Nyx. Champions who do AoE damage in a small area or a very set area would let that damage hit everything that's in that area very reliably. So very fun kit to play with, very fun kit to use for sure. When it gets to the gold raid, a lot of these enemies are high HP and very bulky. So this is one of the places that I could say, when you are starting off, if you pulled Aeon early, that as you were trying to complete your gold raids, you are probably going to have to be playing with more of your high damage dealing champions. Giving them an easier time to kill things off quickly could make her very valuable here. I do think Marri's slow kind of wins out, but if you time out your Aeon ultimates accordingly, she'll be great. She'll be just as great as Marri, for sure. When it comes to gear raids, this is where I think Aeon and Marri can super shine. Specifically, again, we're going to be focused on Aeon for this video, but you having a support at these higher levels can be very useful. And watching how that pulled in and re-sucked them in over and over again, you could create a death spot. So you could have champions like Greed. Everybody's going to be gaining access to Greed in the next couple of days. Or if you had champions like Valkyra, where they put an AoE debuff on everything that she's hitting, pulling everything into that one slot makes your AoE damage much, much more effective than when the targets are spread out across the battlefield. So there is the potential that pulling in targets, I'm going to have to try that for Gear Raid 1. The next time there's an event, I'll let you guys know how it goes, of pulling everything into one spot and then just ulting that one particular spot. And I very easily could do that with Aeon and Comet that I have, because Comet, when he's using his obliteration strike, it does hit AoE for that direct area. So very interesting potential that could be used there. Gear Raid 2, I would not depend on her pulling like the rolling balls off their course. I would assume that they are immune. I don't actually know. I guess let's see if it would work. I will laugh if it works. I shouldn't have done this on 18. I just messed up my own setup. Oh, I also don't have a way to test this out because she doesn't have her ultimate yet. Is he rolling? Oh, he now just runs? Well, that's kind of lame. The game has changed a couple of things, and I guess I was not paying attention to patch notes that these guys are no longer rolling. So yeah, they're not shifting over at all. Now, obviously, they're like up against a wall, so I kind of didn't anticipate it to. But unfortunately, I also can't wait for the boss to come out, because the boss is just going to kill me. I would not expect that you would be able to pull them away from their path of their charging. However, her debuffing the targets in that stage, a lot of them are highly physically defensive or highly magically defensive. So being able to debuff them would let your damage dealers, if you're using fighters or high damage tanks, would allow them to do more reliable damage for sure. In Gear Raid 3, Marri and Aeon both have a very good use here, where as things would trickle through, and I say trickle because you ideally would be killing off all the targets before they get anywhere near your base. However, some will get towards your base. That's the nature of the level. Having a debuffer would help. I don't think that you should be reliant on them. I would say that that if you use Marri or Aeon, use them kind of as a last-ditch effort. I would almost argue it would be better for you to have a high-damaging mage guarding your portal or being back there, rather than trying to rely on debuffing them as they get too close to your portal. However, I have used Marri to great success, or using Marri's Blizzard. You could use Aeon's ultimate to pull them away from your portal long enough for your archers to kill them, as long as your archers are still shooting at those locations, right? Make sure that you time out your ultimates properly. In the faction trials, in your basic faction trial, both Marri and Aeon, I do think, are very valuable here to reduce your, to increase the damage that your opponents take. They're all heavily armored, so any synergy with your mages will help. These support champions do count as mages, not healers, so for hitting your 3 mage requirement would be very advantageous for you here. Lastly, she's a cultist, so when it comes to Trial of the Cultist, she's okay in here. As you get higher up, more enemies become immune to her pulling effect, so you're not going to be able to as reliably use the ultimate for that. However, her ultimate does slow, which still makes it very usable and causes your champions to do 20% extra damage to the targets. So definitely don't dismiss her by any means. And the fact that she's a lord will increase the damage of all your champions by a base of 10%. And then if you use champions, so I'm using her and a Lucas, who is a rare, to slow everything down so that my champions get that extra 20% bonus damage. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it for Aeon. I really hope that you enjoy her. I love her cosmetically. I enjoy her much more than how Marri looks. However, Marri has the heavy CC, and I'm all about supports that do as many debuffs as possible, and Marri kind of has the advantage there. However, the Lord skill that Aeon provides, I think, is very, very large, and is probably going to be the biggest reason that a lot of players, if you have other cultists to play with, are going to favor Aeon over Marri. I would say Marri's kind of your general debuffer, and Aeon is just going to be your, more evil temptress debuffer, And then specifically for Cultists, she's going to be absolutely phenomenal. So with that being said, guys, I hope you found this video useful. If you liked the video, please like and or subscribe down below. It helps me out a whole lot. I've actually been having a lot of fun evaluating as many of the epics. Admittedly, I am getting kind of close to the end of epics I have on my channel where I can review the ones that I actually own. Otherwise, I'm going to have to pull up videos of other people using epics for me to review them. If you want to join us over at twitch.tv/Sprinklebeard, I stream every day, Sunday through Wednesday, semi-reliably. Just depends on my sleep schedule and my work schedule. So try to join us over there. Go ahead and hit the follow button, and you can come hang out with us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching. But of course, until that next time, ta-ta.